Hey guys, so I wanted to share with you guys a valuable lesson I learned recently with commercial leasing and trying to sign leases for office space. I think some of it may seem like maybe some newbie knowledge. At least when I reflect on this, I think it's something that I should have known and understood. But basically, I had two offers out on two different commercial spaces. I was fully intending on moving into either one of the locations, just trying to get the best deal that I could possibly get for our organization. And one of the things that was interesting is trying to get the spaces approved by the franchisor prior to having the actual locations and the actual lease signed. That was interesting. You would think that they would approve a location, even prior to like having leases signed. So it seemed like that was a little bit of a hurdle. Anyway, we got through that and got a really good deal on a location. And basically what it was a sublease, but the landlord agreed to let the current tenant out of his lease. Basically, he went from renting an entire building to only renting a quarter of the space, and we were going to rent a quarter of the space. So the subleasee was happy that we were going to come in, lease the space. The landlord was happy. Landlord offered to, because we requested not to actually sublease, so we thought we were being smart and that we wanted to lease directly from the landlord and not from somebody who may or may not pay things, because we were basically offering a lower rent than what the subleasee was currently paying. So in essence, if he was paying $1,000, we were asking to pay $500. So the subleasee would have had to cover the difference, or we could have potentially been kicked out of the unit, and it been no fault of our own. So the landlord agreed to basically terminate the lease with the then tenant. That tenant agreed to move out. So everything looked great. Got a copy of the lease, reviewed the lease, made edits to the lease, sent them back, got them approved. Everything was good to go. And so the second space that we had, we basically told them that we had found another location, and that we were going to be moving forward in a different direction, but we had appreciated their time. And of course, this is not before asking them if the offer that they had given back to us, if that was their best and final offer that they could give us to incentivize us to rent from them. Meanwhile, their space was 100% vacant, could move in anytime. So long story short, we signed the lease, we pay the security deposit, we bring the signed leases to the commercial landlord's office. The leasing agent, commercial leasing agent, says I have to get the owner to sign these, because property managers don't sign the leases in their offices. And we say, okay, great. No problem. We'll come back. I think we dropped them off on a Friday. We'll come back early part of next week, pick it up. So then early part of next week comes, and I'm calling asking, when is the guy going to be out of the unit? It doesn't look like any movements happen there. And we get told by the leasing agent that the leasing agent can't get in touch with him. The then current tenant has essentially not paid rent for the month, and he's just stopped communicating. So they weren't able to get him out of the unit. They didn't process their lockout paperwork correctly at this commercial building. This commercial management company, by the way, they didn't process their notices correctly, so they sent a notice to the office where I guess they should have posted it at the office and sent it to his physical address, and they wanted to make sure that he had received it and all this nonsense. But long story short, the guy just stopped communicating. So the day that we're supposed to take over on the lease and move in comes and goes, and nothing. So we are communicating 2 and 3 times a day with the commercial leasing agent and the commercial office, and they have no news for us at all. So then we're going, well, wait a minute, where's the copy of our signed lease? Like, we're supposed to have the signed lease back. You guys took our security deposit, we signed the lease, and the leasing agent says, oh, well, the owner won't sign the lease because we haven't been able to get the tenant out of the property. So there were provisions in the lease that would have allowed us to have some repercussions on the landlord if they didn't have the space ready in a certain amount of time. But because the landlord knew that he was dealing with somebody that was non-communicative and they weren't able to get him out, they refused to sign the lease. So long story short, we had to demand the copies of the leases back and the security deposit back. Literally had to go to the office, pick them up, ensure that we had the copies back so they couldn't just sign them at a whim at that point, and hold us to that. And basically we called another commercial leasing company and are in the process of basically renting a spot from another commercial leasing company, because basically the commercial management company failed to, one, sign the leases like they said they were going to do. They failed to properly notify the current tenant that was in the property when he had non-paid rent, so they could do a forced lockout on him. And they failed to properly communicate, and probably this tenant failed to properly communicate with them. Essentially, it was covering, tens of thousands of dollars in debt that tenant was not going to be responsible for, because we were going to take over that lease obligation, and the landlord was going to be nice enough to basically let the guy off the hook. So now none of that's going to happen, because basically we're in the process of renting another place. So through the management company kind of not going above and beyond maybe, and not following through, it's cost the landlord of this commercial property, a tenant that we're signing basically a 3-year lease on a property. So anyway, I thought this was pretty interesting because and this is wrong on my part, but I assumed we're dealing with a commercial lender, or not a commercial lender, a commercial property management company. They're dealing with properties worth several $1 million, and we signed a lease, we gave them the deposit, everybody said everything's good to go, and then they drag their feet and they don't get the owner, assumably that's who they said was supposed to sign the lease. So we didn't have a legally binding contract, and then they just failed to let us know that nobody had signed that contract, even several days after we had signed it. So a lesson to anybody out there, if you're doing your due diligence, and you're basically signing a contract, I could have made sure that contract was signed at the time that I signed the contract, or been unwilling to sign it myself, because basically what happened is the landlord not signing it basically left it open-ended on their part, and then left us no recourse on the landlord. So it left us in a jam. So hope this is helpful to somebody out there. Take care.